Hello, everyone. Jose and Nick here, coming back to you from Moneyline MMA. We have another week of exciting fights headlined by Holm versus Vieira. The first fight of the night is going to be a middleweight bout between Eryk versus Park Yong. The second fight of the night is going to be a women's strawweight bout between Polyana Viana versus Tabatha Ricci. At middleweight, we have Chidi Njokuani versus Dusko Todorovic. And the co-main event is a welterweight bout between Santiago Ponzinibbio versus rising star Michel Pereira. And of course, the main event is a women's bantamweight bout between the former champ Holm versus Viera. All right, and that brings us into our first fight of the night that we're going to talk about, and it's a middleweight bout between Eryk and Jong Park. The 13-5 betting favorite Jong Park takes on the 14-6 underdog Eryk. Jong Park is coming off his second loss in his UFC career after his defeat to Gregory Rodriguez at UFC Vegas 41, which snapped his 3-fight winning streak, while Anders is also coming off a loss to Andre Muniz back at UFC 269 back in December of 2021. Anders has far more experience in the UFC, fighting 13 times in the octagon, and is interestingly opening up as the betting underdog in this matchup. Nick?
Yeah, Jose, I agree. It is fascinating. Eryk Anders does have a size advantage in this fight, standing at 6'1" with the 75-inch reach, compared to Jong Park's 5'10", 73-inch reach. So to me, it does look like Eryk Anders might have the ability to keep distance on the feet and stay away and make those jabs really effective against Jong Park. Jong Park, to me, is one of those guys that's a great multi-tool. He's good in all categories, but he's not really a big threat in any individual category to me. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this fight plays out. Regardless, I'm thinking this fight might last and go to a couple more of the later rounds. I'm really not sure if either of these guys have much of the knockout power that we like to see sometimes in the UFC.
Yes, and Eryk Anders is the plus 184 underdog, while Jong Park is a minus 230 favorite. Eryk Anders, yeah, I think he is a slight fan favorite, more well known to the UFC fans. He does have phenomenal wrestling that I think he needs to utilize more. He does get wild in his exchanges, and I think he needs to pretty much embrace his inner wrestling, avoid any takedowns, and pretty much secure the double legs himself. He does have power. He has strong power, and he gets wild. He does get wild in those exchanges. We must not forget his first round vicious KO over Vinces Mariota, and then he also has faced top competition in the UFC. He's fought UFC legend Lyoto Machida. He's fought Thiago Santos. He's fought Cleo Roundtree, and he's fought Gerald Mearshart. So, and he's got experience against bigger names. He just usually is coming off short, and I just think that he's getting wild and losing these exchanges. So if Jong Park can stay crisp and sharp, he can walk away with a flawless victory in this one, because Eryk Anders has time and time again proven that he can get a little reckless with his striking, but it does pay off sometimes. He does finish people, and if not, he ends up losing majority of the time by decision. And unfortunately, sometimes he's even lost a split decision.
Yeah, Jose, I'd like your great point about the experience that Eryk Anders has seen in his UFC career so far. Much more top end competition on his resume, even though he might not have been successful in beating Thiago Santos, Khalil Roundtree. He did get knocked out by Thiago, but it was at the very end of that fight. He took Khalil Roundtree to decision. He took Jocko to decision, who's another great striker in this division. He was able to take Gerald Mearshart to decision, showing, granted, that was a split decision, very close fight, just showing he has prowess in all areas of this game. I might argue he has the wrestling advantage over Park. If Park wants to take this to the ground, I'm really not even that concerned on the Anders side. He just doesn't pose much of a submission threat. He's never gotten a submission in the UFC. I don't anticipate it to be now, but Park might decide to take this to the ground. He has 2.62 takedown average per 15 minutes. So if Park does take this to the ground, I'm not concerned if I'm on Eryk Anders' side of things. Park may have a little bit of a striking lands per minute average advantage in this case with 4.69 compared to Anders' 3.16. So it does kind of show output wise. Park has that superiority, but they both absorb a lot of strikes, which it would similar 3.93 strikes absorbed per minute. So to me, like you said, that goes to show that Eryk Anders does get a little reckless standing on the ground sometimes. And to me, I'm almost more scared if he's going to just start throwing haymakers and open himself up to Park going with the home run to knock him out. But regardless, I'm definitely leaning towards Eryk Anders on this side. I think both of these guys kind of have their abilities standing and on the ground without that really serious threat to end the fight. So I'm going to go so far as to say Eryk Anders over 2.5 rounds on this fight.
That's a phenomenal pick, Nick. I would have to say, yeah, I would go with Eryk Anders as well. Zhang Park, after making his UFC debut, he did lose via submission due to an anaconda choke, and he went on a 3-fight winning streak. But again, he won all those by decision. He does rack up well with significant strikes, but like you mentioned, Eryk Anders is not that far off. I mean, you're looking at a 47% significant strike rate versus a 48%, 47 being Eryk Anders, and then 48 being Park. I do think this is going to be a back and forth clash and bang. I do think it's going to be exciting, and they're both coming off losses, so you know that they're both really going to stand in there and try to end this as fast as possible, because I know Eryk Anders does not want to go 3 rounds with Zhang Park, and I for sure Zhang Park, I don't know if he's experienced enough to really dictate the pace and control it the way he wants to all 3 rounds, because again, Eryk Anders will get reckless and close the gap and blitz him. And I have not seen enough of Zhang Park to be able to kind of keep his distance and avoid those type of quick collisions and see how he does when he's under the fire like that. You know, like Justin Gaethje going in against Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier would get reckless, but then he would have to bounce back out and stay technical. Zhang Park, I don't know if he can do that quite yet. So that being said, I am going to lean towards the underdog Eryk Anders in winning this, and I don't think it's going to go to decision.
I love it. Well, I think we can both agree it makes sense why Park is the favorite here. And in fact, he has moved to be a heavier favorite as the week has gone by. He was a minus 215 favorite earlier in the week, and he's sitting now at a minus 230. So it's fascinating to see more money going on to Park's side. But Jose and I, you can put it down for us being under Anders. We may not agree on the conclusion of the fight, but we're both under Eryk Anders. Now we're on to the second fight of the main card here at UFC Vegas 55. Tabatha Ricci versus Polyana Viana. Tabatha Ricci being the minus 118 favorite to Viana's minus 104. This line has moved in Viana's favor actually a little bit. Ricci earlier in the week was minus 134. Viana peaked at plus 110, which is fascinating to see. Money is coming in here on Viana, which to me makes sense. I was really surprised to see that Ricci opened as the favorite and is still the slim favorite, but nonetheless a favorite in this fight. She just doesn't have a lot of the MMA experience that I'd like to see when you're fighting someone like Polyana Viana.
Yes, Nick. And I, like you, I was surprised to see the more experienced UFC vet be opening up as the underdog, kind of like the last fight. It seems like there's a trend going on here. I certainly am not afraid to shy away and see what the future of the UFC holds. And I think Tabatha Ricci may be part of that UFC future. I mean, if you look at it, no, she does not have as many submissions or KOs, but I do believe that her grappling skills will be enough to stay up par with Polyana Viana. And I mean, Polyana, she is coming off 2 spectacular first round submission armbars after losing via submission armbar herself, back at UFC Fight Night 156, Shevchenko versus Carmouche 2, August 10th, 2019. Since then, she's only fought, though, once a year. She fought once in 2020 and once in 2021. And during that time period, Tabatha Ricci has fought a total of 5 times. And I'm more of a recency bias guy. So I'm taking it more that the younger, hungrier, and more recently experienced fighter in terms of just getting a lot more fight experience. I think that's all going to add up, because Tabatha Ricci did take about a few years off just to focus more on her training, did not really compete professionally during that time. And then she left back at 2014 and came back in 2020. So, that's a 6-year layoff right there. But since she's come back in September 4th of 2020, she's just been active, winning all but 1 fight.
Yeah, that's fair, Jose. I definitely understand where you're coming from with the recency bias. Viana hasn't been that active with only 2 fights in the last 2 years, and both of those fights ended in the first round, like you mentioned. So it's not like they were long, grueling fights where she would have needed some sort of couple month long recovery. So it is fascinating to see her take her time, continuing to get back in the ring. But regardless, I've seen what I need to see in terms of Viana's ability on the ground, in terms of Ricci, to me, being pretty much solely dependent on her ground game. And I'm just not seeing, at least from her UFC experience, which is only 2 fights so far, but nonetheless, she has not tried a single submission in these 2 fights, being, 2 fights that went the distance in both cases, it looks like. So, or no, the first fight was by a knockout at the end of the first round, second round, excuse me. So, regardless, though, these rounds didn't get ended in the first. These fights didn't get ended in the first round, and I just think Tabatha Ricci, even if she decides to take this fight to the ground, it's not like Viana is at the disadvantage at this point. She's putting out a lot more submission attempts and has a great ground game of her own. And granted, sure, she's been submitted via armbar in the past, but to me, that's a rare occurrence. That's not going to happen from someone that's 4 inches smaller. And not to mention, Viana has a 6 inch reach advantage here. So this, if this fight doesn't play out on the ground the entire time, regardless, in my opinion, Viana has at least a matching ground game to Ricci here. And if Ricci does decide to take this to the ground, I'm not at all scared to be on Viana's side of things.
Yeah, I can see why it's attract like it is an attracting thing to like go for Polyana Viana because yes, her 5'5" height versus Ricci's 5'1" height is eye popping right there, and Polyana does have some quick hands. I will want to notice. I do want to mention she does have impressively a first round KO win over Amanda Ribas, who just fought last weekend at JF Jungle Fight 83 back in 2015. But since then, she hasn't really been finishing people off like that via KO or TKO. She's been more on a submission grind and some decisions as well, and some obviously some losses up in there. I think I'm not too worried actually of Tabatha Ricci being put to sleep by Polyana Viana. I do maybe I guess worry is that she will utilize her distance and will rack up some points that way. But I think Tabatha Ricci is aggressive enough to, as always, like I like it when they take them down, is just close that distance, close that gap, and bring them down and make it dirty. And I think Tabatha Ricci has more of a chance to actually put out Polyana Viana than Polyana Viana is to put out Tabatha Ricci. And I just don't see, for some reason, I just don't see the jiu-jitsu really being a big part of this. I do think that Tabatha Ricci is well aware that Polyana Viana has phenomenal submission game just as well as Polyana Viana, even though it's not on record as much. Tabatha Ricci does have phenomenal submission game as well. So I know that they both are going to be expecting that and they will respect that. I do expect that Polyana Viana may have a little confidence because she's the bigger girl and the more experienced girl, the more experienced fighter in this case, that she may just try to actually win and maybe feel confident and win it all on her feet. That being said, I do think Tabatha Ricci, I'm a little surprised that she actually is not the underdog, but I'm happy because, I'm a little sad she's not the underdog because I do want her to win, but hey, she's the favorite. Other people see her being as the favorite as well. And I'm going to go that way with the favorite in this fight with Tabatha Ricci.
Yeah, you might be right about this fight staying on the feet. In to me, this it's going to come down to what Tabatha Ricci wants to do. Polyana Viana does not attempt many takedowns of her own. She might do one. I mean, her average right now is 1.12 takedowns average per 15 minutes. So I wouldn't expect Viana to be the one to initiate this, especially like I mentioned earlier with that size advantage. So to me, it really comes down to Ricci. Is she going to decide to take this to the ground? And she might get a little gassed out by the second round, third round, and she might try and shoot a couple takedowns, in which case Viana's takedown defense is 50%. So Ricci's going to land a couple of those takedowns if she attempts them, and we'll see where it goes from that point. But regardless, if this fight stays on the feet, I think Viana is by far at the advantage state. We're looking at Ricci's strikes absorbed is kind of crazy. I hate to see it when a fighter absorbs more strikes than they deal. Tabatha Ricci's looking at a 6.52 strikes absorbed. She just seems to not really know how to get her way out of these punches. And with Viana's 3.01 strikes absorbed per minute and a higher strikes landed per minute, I really see Viana having the advantage on the feet. And if it stays there for even 2 rounds of this 3 round fight, I think she's going to take the win. So put me down for Viana. I was on her early on this fight. and I got her as an underdog before she became minus 104. So I would suggest following me, but Jose made some good points as well.
All right, Nick, and that brings us over to our featured middleweight bout. We got Chidi Njokuani versus Dusko Todorovic. Njokuani is the favorite at minus 192, and Dusko Todorovic is the betting underdog at a plus 150, 154. Chidi's coming back. Everyone knows him as making a spectacular 16-second KO UFC debut right after him coming off Dana White's Contender Series. And Dusko Todorovic, he is a young prospect. He has some losses in his UFC career, but he's looking to try to get a win over here on the Chidi Njokuani this weekend, Nick.
Yeah, Jose, I totally agree. This is going to be a really intriguing fight. It's always really dangerous for me to see guys that are those quick stars that shine in the Dana White Contender Series come out and get a 16-second knockout and just look ridiculous. And to me, those are kind of sometimes the guys I like to fade. But in this case, I'm struggling. I mean, Dusko is a really tough guy, a big dude that I'm worried about. He's fought now 5 times in the UFC, and most of these fights have ended in a knockout one way or the other. So this guy likes to throw some hands, and he's exciting to watch. With an 11-2 record, he's been successful in most of those bouts. He has a pretty insane 5.8 strikes landed per minute, which is really high for fighters. I mean, Chidi himself has 3.91. Granted, that's only with these 2 UFC fights included. To me, this fight's going to be on this is going to be standing. Neither of these guys favor the ground game. Chidi has great takedown defense, and if someone wants to try and take it there, he's happy to wrestle, but he's just not going to be going for those submissions. And obviously, since we haven't really seen anyone try and bring him to the ground for the whole distance of the fight, because Chidi's been able to just knock out both of his opponents UFC wise.
Right, Nick. And with that, though many people have not tried, Chidi does have a 78% takedown defense. Dusko's got some pretty good defense, wrestling defense himself with 50% takedown defense. Dusko, in this case, his youth and inexperience compared to Chidi is kind of what worries me when looking at this matchup, though I am heavily impressed by his first round TKO win over Michel Pereira, which we're going to talk about later tonight. And that is actually an extremely impressive win to have on your resume, especially for a kid like him. That being said, he does have power, and I do think that he's going to try to clip Chidi early. I do think that he's not going to want to stay there all 3 rounds, and I think that his youth though is going to get the worst of him. I guess Chidi has far more experience, even though he's not been in the UFC for long. Man, this guy has had an extensive career. Like, he's fought multiple times for Bellator, so he does have that professional experience. And Chidi has notable wins before he got into the UFC over Melvin Gillard, Andre Fahil, who just fought, and he also has a win over Max Payne Griffin back in 2015 on the local circuit. So that being said, Chidi, he's not been in the UFC long, but not only is his Bellator experience, but some of the dudes he has beaten before he's gotten to the UFC or just yet alone fought. But I'm more impressed by those wins over Melvin Gillard, Andre Fahil, and Max Griffin. Those winning them, even that Max Griffin fight, that was a split decision, 5-round split decision fight. So it could have gone either way, but he's already shown that he, can go 5 rounds. So I think Chidi's hungry. He's one of those guys that came over from Bellator. He's not as loud and explosive as Michael Chandler was when he came over. He didn't get that special treatment in terms of already being on the main card right off the bat. Not as big a name. That's what comes with it when you're not as big of a name. That being said, don't let his UFC experience alone deter you. It has to be, look at his overall record, and he's fought some top competition, but more I think, impressive than Dusko Todorovic.
Yeah, Jose, and to me, Chidi's really getting into his prime here. At 33 years old, I really think he's gotten to the point where he's seen really good experience in his fighting career, and he's starting to fight some more of the higher level guys, obviously now in the UFC. So it's going to be fascinating. Not that Dusko hasn't seen some talented guys, like you mentioned, his win in the Serbian Battle Championship against Michael Pereira with a knockout there. So that's why I mentioned Dusko is not a guy to sleep on. We're not at all saying that this is going to be easy for Chidi by any means, but Chidi is just, he's got a really big size advantage here that I think he's going to be able to utilize. He has an 80-inch reach listed at, according to Tapology at least, which is just, I mean, that wingspan is crazy. Dusko's got 74-inch reach. I think 6 inches is a pretty big advantage. Chidi's just a bigger guy, and I think he wins the striking difference here. Dusko puts out a lot of volume, but I'm just not really as concerned about his ability to get a knockout on Chidi. So I'm gonna scratch it in Chidi on this fight, and I'd be so far as to say KO.
That is an excellent bet right there, Nick. I'm leaning towards a similar route as you. I mean, Chidi, his last 3 wins impressive. He's won TKO knees to the body. He's gotten TKO with his elbows, and he's got knockouts, just straight up first round knockout. He's only getting better and better, is what I see. But again, he's done this before. You can look through his record. He's gotten KOs, he's gotten TKOs, he's got even decision wins and even some submissions as well. I just think overall, he's one of those late bloomers for sure, and I think he's going to be a bigger name in the UFC pretty soon. I think a lot of people will be talking about Chidi and know how to pronounce his last name for sure within the next year or so.
That's a great point. Knowing how to pronounce his name is definitely something that he's going to have people want to do, because he's going to be known at least at a much higher rate in the middleweight division going forward. It's going to be fascinating to see how that turns out. But regardless, I mean, we've seen Dusko get knocked out by Punahele Soriano back in January 2020. So considering we've seen him get knocked out by some other guys in the UFC that aren't as significant in my opinion, I would definitely lock it in Chidi by knockout.
Yeah, I would lock it in Chidi by knockout and TKOs/TKO as well. Like you said, Dusko, I'm not too concerned about him putting him out. I do think he's not as fast as Chidi. Chidi's extremely quick. So that being said, I'm gonna have to lean with you on this one. I got Chidi again, TKO versus a slash KO. And again, Chidi is a -192 favorite, while Dusko is a +154 underdog.
All right, and that brings us to our co-main event: Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Michel Pereira. Very excited to see this fight. One of the more seasoned veterans around the UFC, even though he's 28 years old. He's had a lot of fights in his pro fighting career. So I'm really excited to see Pereira come back out here and fight again against Santiago Ponzinibbio, who's 35 years old, who's actually a lot older and has a little bit, arguably more UFC experience at least, over Pereira, even though they both have a pretty extensive fighting career. Regardless, this is going to be a really interesting fight, Jose. I think it might really end up who can be the better striker here.
Yeah, Nick, this is gonna be a close one. It is versus a lot of experience versus it is experience versus experience. Just one who's been more in the UFC, and the other one who just looks like is gonna be the next breakout star almost. Santiago Ponzinibbio, yes, he is coming off a loss skid since he's come back to the UFC. He left for a bit, took some time off. He took a little over 2 years off back when he knocked out Neil Magny. At UFC Fight Night 140 in the fourth round. Phenomenal knockout, and he was already he was coming off 6 wins already going into that fight with Neil Magny. He retired, and he was a big prospect. He was like, oh man, this guy, he not retired, but he walked away from the sport for a bit. He's done some announcing for the Spanish commentary team, and then when he came back in January 16th of 2021, everyone was excited, and unfortunately, the fight did not go his way. Of course, his welcome back, he ended up losing in the first round. He came and won against Miguel Beza, and then he lost to Jeff Neal versus a split decision. That being said, he has phenomenal experience. I'm just not sure if he's the same guy he was before he took that layoff back in 2018. Michel Pereira, he's coming off, this dude is phenomenal. He's on a 4-fight win streak, but everyone knows he should be on a 5-fight win streak. All right, that fight against Diego Sanchez, he disqualified himself, and everyone knows it was not looking good at all for Diego Sanchez. Diego Sanchez was pretty much getting pieced up by Michael Pereira, and I'm surprised that Michel Pereira didn't finish him sooner, because he was just too busy, I guess, just flipping around, being athletic, which is a habit of his he had early on in his UFC, like early when he came to the UFC career. For example, when he first fought Tristan Connolly, a lot of people were upset that this guy just spent more time doing flips and running around the cage than he actually did engaging in the fight. And then the same thing kind of hurt him against Diego Sanchez. But since then, he's been getting more serious about his fighting and not really showcasing that type. He's been showcasing his athleticism in the proper way, where he's letting his athleticism be released through the way he fights now, like actually landing punches and trying to stay technical, as opposed to just running around doing flips. I mean, I think that's a big reason why he got into the UFC in the first place. There was a video of him going viral, just literally flipping all over the place. And again, he has calmed that down. So he's showing what a beast he can be when he stays calm. Again, him just winning by unanimous decision has already shown how much he's matured.
Without a doubt, Jose. I think we're really going to see what these men got in this fight. Honestly, with Santiago trying to kind of reboot the magic that he had, like you mentioned, back in 2016 through 2018, trying to bring those glory days back. He's had a couple rough fights, but he still has magic in those gloves. He's not that old, so he's definitely a big threat to me in this fight. He's a big dude with long arms, and I think he's got a real good chance to piece up Michael Pereira in this fight. To me, though, Pereira has a big, massive advantage on the ground. I don't think Pereira is really going to lean on that by any means, but this guy, if he wants to take it to the ground, I think he would be able to. It's not that he has a crazy high takedown advantage, but that is just there as an option if he does feel a little bit threatened, like he is going to get KO'd and needs a little bit of a break, get some ground control time. Santiago has a 60% takedown defense, which is pretty decent, but in the end, Pereira is the one with the 100% takedown defense through 6 or 7 UFC fights at this point, and they pretty much match each other in terms of measurables. They're both the same height and weight and reach. I'm pretty excited. To me, like I said at the beginning, this is going to come down to the striking side of things. And from what I'm seeing, Pereira has much more management of his strikes with 55% significant strike accuracy to Santiago's 40%. I think that 15% is relatively significant in showing that Pereira can conserve his energy, and the punches he does throw has the higher chance of hitting, which leads to a lower strikes absorbed. So he's able to take that time and focus on where Santiago might be targeting and avoid getting those extra hits landed on him. So regardless, to me, I think this fight could go a little bit further. Michel Pereira's last 3 fights have gone to decision where he's won unanimously. So I would not be surprised if that was the case here. Because Santiago is not an easy guy to knock out by any means. He was knocked out, like you mentioned, in his return fight back in 2021. But at this point, I think he's been training for long enough. I think he's going to have a pretty iron chin. So I would lean towards this fight being over 2.5 rounds.
Yeah, Nick, and I was observing that too. Their measurables, their height, reach advantage, as far even their takedown defense is their I mean to see their overall defense of 61 versus 60 is what I meant to say is pretty crazy. I mean, Ponzinibbio has that 4.79 landers per minute versus Michel Pereira's versus his 4.71. It is. I think it's going to be a very technical strike. I think it literally is going to be that UFC vet who's experienced and staying sharp versus against a guy who's still sharpening up his tool shed. I wouldn't even be surprised if this does end up making it to a unanimous decision. I just don't know who would really go to in this case because it is almost. It seems like it's almost like the same two guys are fighting each other. Just one is, I think, more athletic. That being said, I would lean towards Michel Pereira because of his athleticism. He is an exciting fighter. He thrives off crowd energy. Don't think there is going to be a crowd here, but he still puts on a show every time, no matter how big or small the audience is. That being said, they both also, I don't think it's going to be much of a problem, but they do both have some submissions on their records. Michel Pereira has 7, while Santiago Ponzinibbio has 6. They have not got submissions in a while, so I do think it's going to be more on the feet. I think Michel Pereira is going to be calm and collected, but I would not be surprised out of nowhere he starts throwing random Superman punches. He backs up against the cage and pushes off with one foot and just launches forward. Cartwheel here and there. That being said, I do think it's going to be a lot. It's going to be like Clash of the Titans, man. It's going to be not so much trying to end each other, but just overall, I think it's going to be a fight where if it ends, it's going to be multiple strikes just being landed until they have to put someone out, not just a one-hitter quitter.
Sure, and I think the line reflects that too. Like you mentioned, I mean, Michael Pereira is a minus 120. Santiago is minus 102. These guys are really even in the spreads right now. So I think the betting audience is also kind of agreeing that this is almost a toss-up in terms of who's going to win this fight. But if you ask me, I'm leaning Pereira by decision.
That's an excellent pick, Nick. I'm doing the same thing. I'm leaning Pereira via decision. Again, I'm more of a recency bias guy. If this was Santiago Ponzinibbio back in 2018, 2017, it'd be a different story for sure. But again, coming off that loss and the terror Michael Pereira has been, and like I said, he should have 5 fights, one in a row, not 4. Again, because he disqualified himself against Diego Sanchez. So I think this would have been a much more fun fight to see if this was the Santiago Ponzinibbio in the same condition that he was back in 2018, 2017, like I said. But again, it's not. He did take some time off and has come back and has not quite looked exactly like he used to. So that being said, I'm going with the guy that's making some changes, and we see it in every fight getting better and better, which is Michel Pereira. So yeah, I will lean with Michel Pereira via unanimous decision as well. All right. And that leaves us to the main event. That leaves us with the 14-5 favorite Holly Holm versus the 12-2 underdog Ketlen Vieira. Holly Holm is the favorite at minus 230, while Ketlen Vieira is the underdog at plus 184. This is a nice match to see Holly Holm back in it, Nick. She's not as active as a lot of people like to see. She's not fought since October of 2020, while Ketlen Viera is just coming off a unanimous decision win over the former champ Michel back at UFC Fight Night 198. This is gonna be a fun one. I think it's gonna be a nice welcome back fight for Holly Holm. What are your thoughts, Nick?
Without a doubt, Jose, I think this is going to be really interesting. It is going to be interesting. Holly Holm is 40 years old now, which is really crazy to think, and that does give me a little concern with this fight since she hasn't fought in almost 2 years now. It was October 2020, so it's been about a year and 7 months. So, oh, man, this is going to be really close. I think Holly Holm. I think we can all trust her to stay in health and stay in great shape, is what I'm trying to say, and to be ready for a 5 round fight. Her last fight against Irene Aldana went the full distance to 25 minutes, and she won that by unanimous decision. And I get that that was a good, time ago, but I don't think that's going to change too much. I think it's not like she just left the gym and hasn't worked out since then. I guarantee she's been in shape and working out as if she was going to be fighting the whole time because that's her lifestyle. And that's not to take away from Ketlen Vieira. She's a beast in her own right, and she can stand up and do some damage on her feet as well, which is really fascinating because she's got a little bit of her multi-tool aspect with 1.71 takedown average per 15 minutes and a 90% takedown defense. It really seems like she has that ground superiority, and she does have a relative grappling history, having gotten an arm triangle submission on Sarah McMahon back in 2017. So it will be fascinating to see if that's something she tries to utilize against Holly Holm, but I'm not really convinced it's going to become a factor. Holly Holm still has a 76% takedown defense, and I think even if Ketlen Vieira decides to try and take this to the ground, I think she'll be relatively unsuccessful. Holly Holm should be able to get back up to her feet, and I think this will be mostly taking place on the feet.
Yeah, I agree. That's on the feet is exactly where Holly Holm, the future Hall of Fame boxing, going into the Hall of Fame pretty soon for the Boxing Hall of Fame. And so that being said alone, this fight is going to stay up on the feet where Holly Holm is the most comfortable. And I don't think Kayla Vieira is too nervous about that. She's been thrown in a lot of, I think this is maybe her coming out party if she wins. I've noticed that they do match her up with a lot of people who've been on tears. I mean, she's gotten impressive wins, a submission arm triangle choke, like you mentioned, over Sarah McMahon. Who's a former title challenger, as well as Kat Sagano, a former title challenger as well. She won via split decision back at UFC 222. She did lose in the first round to Irene Aldana, who's also up and coming via KO in the first round. But without a doubt, her most recent unanimous decision win over the former champ Michel is what put her in this position. And if she can get a win over Holly Holm, I can definitely see her being a title challenger right off the bat. That's what kind of happens with these females in these scenarios. They do, unfortunately, just due to the available talent that is in the UFC do get pushed sometimes to title challenges sooner than maybe what they should. But this is one of those fights where we're really going to see who Ketlen Vieira is. She's going to go against the former champ Holly Holm. And again, she's not, nothing new to her being matched up against former title challengers and former champs. That being said, Holly Holm does have phenomenal striking. She comes from a great camp at Jackson Week MMA in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and she utilizes her height and reach advantage to the fullest. And I guess that's what happens when you train with John Jones all the time. At least she used to. And Holly Holmes, her losses, her 5 losses. I mean, come on, Miesha Tate, when Miesha Tate, when she was just looking fire back in 2016, Valentina Shevchenko, Jermaine Duranamine, Cyborg, and Amanda Nunes. I mean, the last 3 fights that she had, the last 5, all 5. Okay, I was gonna say the last 4, last 5, but all 5 fights in general, no shame in losing to these people. Amanda Nunes, one of the greatest of all time. Cyborg, also one of the greatest of all time. Jermaine Duranamine is a phenomenal kickboxer as well, and also former champ, as well as Valentina Shevchenko. Again, phenomenal kickboxing, one of the greatest of all time for female champions as well. And Miesha Tate, OG, someone who's been it from the beginning, a female pioneer of MMA. So that being said, Holly Holm, no shame to her losses. It seems like she does lose to just people who are just already in their prime. And that's what we're going to find out this Saturday, whether Ketlen Vieira is in her prime or not yet, because Ketlen Vieira has come up and stepped up when it's been, has rising up, I guess, to the challenges, and has proven why they keep matching her up with former champions and former title contenders. So that being said, I do think Holly Holm, she has had almost a 2-year layoff, but she's always been crisp. Even those fights she's lost, she's most of the time looked sharp and crisp. Like that fight against Cyborg, that went unanimous decision, I almost thought that should have been a split decision. And that was just a great fight. That was one of those fights where they really brought, I've ever seen someone really bring it to Cyborg besides Amanda Nunes. But she's extremely technical, and she has just a high striking rate. She has a 3.16 landed per minute, 38% significant strikes versus Ketlen Vieira's 38% as well. So their defense, they both have good defense as well. They're both probably not going to be on the feet as much. I do think maybe Ketlen Vieira would feel a little more comfortable trying to go for a submission. That being said, I think just Holly Holm, the vet in her experience and her striking ability is pretty much going to help her cruise to a decision, most likely a unanimous decision win if she doesn't get that head kick KO or something.
Yeah, those points about Holly Holm's experience are on point, Jose. What was really fascinating to me, too, is that through all of those 5 major losses Holly Holm took, only one of those fighters was able to do that before the 5th round, which was Amanda Nunes. So Holly Holm has proven that she can stick it through, get to the championship rounds. She's fought in 5 championship fights at the UFC. She's definitely been there, done that. And I fully expect her to continue to bring it at her highest level to Ketlen Vieira. So this really will be a test for Viera that I just don't think she's going to pass. To me, it's relatively unlikely that Holly Holm gets a knockout here. I would definitely lean towards the over on this fight. It is possible. Holly Holm does have a few knockouts under her belt on some pretty good fighters. Beth Correa back in 2017. It's been so long. I mean, she knocked out Ronda Rousey back in 2015, but it's hard to say that that's even relevant anymore. So regardless, I still think we're going to see a glimpse of the previous Holly Holm that we've seen in the past. Maybe not the full form, but it's going to be enough to take out Ketlen Vieira, in my opinion. I'll go Holly Holm in over-under on the rounds. I'm not able to find anything for the over-under here on FanDuel, but I would lean over 3.5. Maybe not so much over 4.5, but without a doubt, we're going Holly Holm.
That's a great pick, Nick. Yeah, and this was just a tough one for me because another thing I do like to look at, when there's really good, tall, significant strikers, is how their height and reach advantage compares to their opponent. And I mean, they're both standing at 5'8". Holly Holm has a 6'9" reach advantage. Ketlen Vieira has a 68-inch reach. So, Holly does have that 1 inch advantage. That being said, like Holly Holm has also gone against, taller, tall people like this in the past as well. Like, for example, Megan Anderson, one of the taller girls that was ever in the UFC. She was phenomenally known for being like the female skyscraper pretty much. And so that being said, like I'm just really impressed with Holly's fight IQ, not only against people who don't have as well striking as her, but just with people that can't stand toe to toe with her and are as tall as her. I don't know if Ketlen's going to come in with the same power that Cyborg and Amanda Nunes has, and nor the same type of striking ability as Jermaine Duranami and Valentina Shevchenko. And that being said, I would probably lean towards Holly Holm on this as well. If she doesn't get a head kick KO like one of her signature moves, it's definitely going to be via points, unanimous decision.
All right, as goes with every week, we are on to my favorite portion, the betting portion, where Jose and I give our picks of the week and where we are going to make some money on these fights coming up this Saturday. Our first best bet of the week is going to come in the over-under for the Anders and Jun Park fight. We're going to say that the over 2.5 on that fight is a best bet. You can get that at minus 200 at most sports books. And without a doubt, no matter who's going to win that fight, we had Anders winning the fight. Without a doubt, I think that goes to the distance. Our next best bet of the night is going to be our lock of the night, actually. Jose and I both endorse Chidi Njokuani as our lock of the night and another best bet. This guy, it may not get the first round knockout that we've seen in his past 2 UFC fights, but we believe strongly that he's going to get this win over Dusko. Whether or not it comes via knockout or decision, it's a lock. It's guaranteed money. So keep your eye out for that one. Another part of our betting is we like to give underdogs of the week. So this week, Jose's underdog, as we gave a little foreshadowing for, is Eryk Anders, which we both agreed on him, and I think that's a great underdog for Jose. My underdog, though, is actually going to be Polyana Viana. That might be a little bit of a cheat now that because it's almost even, but I'm taking the credit there because I got in on her when she was a plus 110 underdog. So she is my underdog of the week. Keep your eye out for her in our parlay, which is another big aspect of our betting that we like to do. But before that, I just want to point out that we were kind of exploring some other betting options, and I just like to give you guys some insight on my thought process when making these picks because when I was looking at the Holly Holm Ketlen Vieira over under, I had mentioned during our previous segment that I might consider over 3.5 rounds, and I'd likely not consider over 4.5. And currently, the sports book I'm looking at has over 4.5 rounds for that main event fight at a way too high of a number. So being minus 256, that that is just way too much. You're not getting enough money for the chance to only win that bet if it gets to the last 2.5 minutes. I understand that it is likely that the fight goes to decision, but we're still dealing with Holly Holm. She has enough of an ability to maybe not knock out in one punch, but to get a knockdown and continue with the flurry afterwards on the ground, enough to make the referee call this fight. And Ketlen has her own relatively small but submission threat as well. So if it does come to that, you would hate to lose a minus 256 bet because you're banking on it getting to the last 2.5 minutes. I'm not confident enough. If you really want to put your money down on something that's minus 250, you might as well just put your money down on Holly Holm money line because it's just not that likely at all in any outcome that Viera wins this fight. So to close this segment out, I'm going to give out a couple of parlays endorsed by Moneyline MMA. But before that, I want to remind you guys to follow us on Twitter at Moneyline MMA, subscribe on YouTube, and if you really enjoy this, go ahead and click the notifications button. And I promise every week when there's fights on Saturday, we're going to be here breaking these fights down and giving our best bets. That being said, our first parlay of the week here is going to be the most guaranteed parlay in terms of winning your money back. We got Polyana Viana plus Pereira plus Holm. These are three people that are relatively, I guess Polyana Viana is the underdog in her fight, but otherwise we've got two favorites here, and I think this is a really high chance hit here at plus 402 on the FanDuel Sportsbook. So your $10 bet will win you 40 back. I think that is a really high chance of winning. If you guys want to get a little bit more bang for your buck, our lock, Chidi, must be put on here. There's no way I'm not doing a bet in a parlay in UFC Vegas 55 without putting our lock, Chidi, into this parlay. So that being said, make it a four leg. It sits at plus 647 on FanDuel, and that will be our parlay of the week, endorsed by Moneyline MMA. You can put a couple bucks down on that and win 6 times your money. So go ahead, go to your choice of sportsbook, put some bets down, and let us know in the comments how much you're winning back.
And again, if you enjoyed that, please don't forget to follow us on YouTube and on Twitter at Moneyline MMA. And just a reminder, there are no fights next weekend, so we will not be uploading a video next week. Thank you, guys.